Education funding has been a hot-button issue in the state of New Hampshire for the last few years, and Americans for Prosperity New Hampshire is hosting an event, Pints Policy, over at Great North Ale Works in Manchester, New Hampshire. Dive into a conversation with Education Commissioner Frank Edelblut, as well as Deputy State Director Sarah Scott from Americans for Prosperity. Going to be a very interesting conversation. You'll be able to listen to the entirety of that conversation in the New England Take podcast feed at thenewenglandtake.com, as well as if you search on all major podcast platforms for the New England Take, you'll be able to see it there. I had the chance to talk to them both before the presentation and to kind of dive into what they think the current status of education funding is, and Commissioner Edelblut with what sort of reforms are needed to really fix our education system. What's Americans for Prosperity looking to do through conversations through Pints Policy?
So we're taking complicated issues that are really important to everyday Americans right now and breaking it down into terms that they can understand. So we're taking issues like education. Everybody knows about education. It's something that's really important to the majority of Americans right now, and explaining how education is funded to kind of help people understand why certain policies may or may not improve outcomes or funding. So we're taking the issue of education funding and we're going to look at where the money is coming from, different trends that we've noticed over the past 10 or so years, and really kind of the direction that we think things should move in to see better outcomes for students as well as protecting taxpayers' pockets.
Now, you've specifically been on the show a couple times in the past talking about education freedom accounts. I mean, are those in a good place right now? Are we going in the right direction on it?
Absolutely. I think we're seeing tons of kids looking at this option. We're seeing really positive feedback from the families that have taken advantage of those so far. We've got over 3,000 students in the program right now, and I think so far we've seen that there's really a need for this. We really thought that when the program first opened it would be a little slower in the uptake, but clearly based on the interest in the program, people see a need for it and are really looking for options that are just going to work for their child.
With your conversation with Commissioner Edelblut, we're recording this before that happens. I mean, what's your goal with it?
So overall, the goal is to really give people a better understanding of how funding works here, because right now when we're having discussions about how to improve education outcomes and what different policies might look like, a lot of that is hampered by the fact that nobody really knows how this funding situation works. So there's a lot of misunderstanding and miscommunication about the issue, and so the overall goal is to just give people an understanding so that when we're discussing future legislation or future pushes for things, we're all kind of starting from a point of knowledge and understanding.
Anyone that wants to get involved with Americans for Prosperity, education funding, or just learning more about it, what should people do?
So if you're interested, feel free to reach out to me. We have a Twitter, AFPNH. We also have a website, americansforprosperity.com. You can learn more about what we do and how to get involved.
Thank you so much. To start off, I mean, what's the status with K-12 education in your opinion? Are we going in the right direction?
So we do see some areas of positive indicators, across the state. In fact, we're going to be releasing some results a little bit later this week that will show that New Hampshire is not following the national trends, which truthfully are not that encouraging. Essentially, what you've seen is that the best educators in the world have received almost unlimited funding and $190 billion of COVID relief funds. And NEWA released a report last week that showed that it's really not having the impact that everybody had aspired to. I think we're seeing a little bit of a different result here in the state of New Hampshire, but across the country, that's not a great sign. But I also can tell you that, education is facing a lot of headwinds. They're facing headwinds relative to demographics. We're simply running out of students. We've lost over 46,000 students in the last 20 years here in New Hampshire. We're down. When we say lost, we know they just weren't around, right? So we didn't lose them per se, but we have fewer students, exactly. Well, they didn't move, they just weren't born, right? People are not having families, they're postponing having families. We've seen the cost of education, the topic of tonight's discussion, has shown that it's getting higher and higher and an increasing burden for our taxpayers. We've got the issue relative to really what I say is the outcomes for students. And so COVID really showed a decline in the outcomes, but really all that did was reveal the systemic problems that we were having before that took place. And so we really are not getting what we had hoped out of the system. And then finally, there's what I refer to as the content transparency concerns that have been brought up. And so what you find is, as a result of COVID, families had a window into what's going on in their classroom, and they've expressed some concerns about the quality and the type of content that their students are being exposed to. And so there's a lot of opportunity in education. And so my message to my school leaders really across the state is we need edupreneurs, right? Because education, public school, can't survive all these headwinds on its own. We're going to need innovation and creativity, and it's the edupreneurs that are going to be able to solve those problems, but we need to break free of the status quo. And we've got a lot of organizations that are very happy to just ride the gravy train, to just keep things exactly the way that they are with the status quo. The number one among them is probably our educator unions, who they benefit from the status quo, and they would like to see that happen, that stay there. And so really what we need to do is we need to unleash the power of entrepreneurs, edupreneurs in this space to be able to see stuff improve.
And money is how you make that happen. Ultimately, how do you make sure you strike that balance between making sure we have the traditional public education system, but we're also able to reform, offer other solutions for families that maybe want to go to a charter or private school or need other programming?
So I don't understand your premise. You're saying that money is what makes it happen, but all the research over decades, like over 3-4 decades, would show you that increased funding is not actually what would change that trajectory. Maybe some necessity would change that trajectory, some innovation, some creativity. On a commercial side, organizations are able to do more with less on a regular basis and improve the quality of customer service. And so as schools are facing these headwinds, there's opportunity to not keep doing the same things, because as you kind of proposed, you keep the status quo and then you add additional things in the orbit of that status quo. How about if we transform the status quo so that it meets the needs of the students and addresses the concerns of the constituencies, which are, the families, the teachers, the taxpayers, and the students.
Is New Hampshire a leader in this?
We are a leader in this, but it's a tough, it's a tough change to make happen, right? An entrenched government bureaucracy does not move easily.
Super interesting conversation this evening for the Americans for Prosperity panel, Pints Policy on education funding. The full audio will be available at the newenglandtake.com and all our podcast platforms. And be sure to subscribe to the New England Take.